Welcome to Africa and Us. I'm your host, Nathan Araya. To better understand the causes, symptoms, and solutions on mental health, I held an Instagram Live conversation and community discussion with psychiatric nurse Ledet Muleta to discuss the topics of anxiety, trauma, and substance abuse. This is Africa and Us.
This amazing, phenomenal woman that we have with us this evening is a founder, director of Medixa Health Services. Ledet has been working in the field of mental health for the past 14 years. Her passion in mental health and psychology stems from the rich experiences she has had as a psychiatric nurse, as well as she's been a member of several organizations focusing on the diaspora and Africa, and hopes to continue her work in decreasing the disparities that exist within these communities. And Ledet is also a writer and producer of a new film coming out called Chula. So I'm really excited to see that film and you know what that's going to be about. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So once again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, and hello everyone.
So here we go. I'm having problems with this tripod, but hopefully it'll stick together. So let me just start off with this. There's such a negative connotation around mental health, at least seeking for help. There's many people that just don't know how to handle kind of like a lot of these thoughts and things that they're dealing with. And it's a lack of information, and it's a misunderstanding that's surrounding this topic and seeking help. So what are some ways that we can better normalize seeking help, for proper mental health care within our culture, our community, and our society today?
What we're doing exactly, Nate, what you're doing today by, having this candid conversation about mental health, about anxiety, about, any type of psychological issues that a person may have, needs to be discussed, and that's the way to remove stigma around it. It's just like any kind of illness that is surrounded by a stigma, and the number one step is discussing it, because this is not an illness that discriminates. This is an illness that can happen to any one of us. It doesn't have boundaries. It affects people who are rich, poor, doesn't matter what type of background you come from, and therefore there really should not be any stigma surrounding it. We need to acknowledge that, and the way to acknowledge it is to be able to freely discuss it. With mental illness, currently in the U.S., 1 out of 5 people are affected. So there is no reason to have stigma around this illness and suffer in silence. And especially in our community, the stigma is huge, and it needs to be reduced. And the way to reduce it is to involve regular people to have this conversation. So that would be the number one way, is to talk about it, and increasing our resources about that. Could be, creating films about that, or authors writing books about that. But that would be the number one thing, is to get the conversation started.
Great. So let's start off with anxiety, the topic of anxiety. I know that's something that many of us deal with, many different people within the community. So, what are the common causes of anxiety that you've seen within your profession that affect our culture and community today?
Stress is the number one cause. We have relationship issues, stressful environments, and so forth. So I would say anything that is causing some sort of stressor could be a reason. And then the other types of anxiety that you can have is genetics. So you have no control over it. You are already prone to having this issue because it's in your genes. So those are the 2 types of anxiety disorders you can have.
Right. So, what are some of the signs that someone may be struggling with anxiety, with an anxiety disorder?
Some of the signs would be, palpitations, having fear, difficulty breathing, uh, wanting to avoid. Basically, it's the fear of wanting to know what's going to happen next and just being afraid of what is going to happen next. It's a perceived idea that makes you feel like, I don't know what's going to happen. And therefore, I'm very nervous, I'm anxious, I'm sweating, my heart rate is going up. Those are the types of that you have when you have anxiety.
So, if someone is struggling with anxiety, what are the proper steps that someone may need to take in order to get proper treatment and help? And what does proper treatment and help even look like?
So, like we mentioned about anxiety being, from two categories. The number one thing is identifying why the anxiety is occurring. Sometimes it could be because of certain reasons. It could there's relationship issues. It could be because there's death in the family. It could be many reasons to why you're having the anxiety. So identifying the type of anxiety, is it genetics? So once the anxiety is identified, then you will look into the next step, which is self-help. What can I do in order to make this anxiety go away or reduce this anxiety? Can you do self-talk? Can you talk yourself out of the anxiety that that is happening? Is it something that you could do? Could you eat better? Could you exercise? Are you able to sleep? What are some of the things that you could do for yourself? And then the third step that I would say would be seeking therapy. The next step is that therapy is, where you can discuss everything that's going on in your life, and sometimes you're not able to identify the exact problem yourself. So having a therapist is somebody who's going to be a second party that is going to look at your life from the outside and will identify some issues for you that you need to possibly deal with. So therapy would be the third one, and then the last measure would be going to see a doctor to see if you actually need to have medications be part of treating your anxiety.
So therapy definitely has its own taboos because we're very uncomfortable with what's unfamiliar. And we didn't grow up, at least people within my community and myself, I never grew up with the awareness of what therapy is. I always knew that it was something for crazy people or people that have, it's almost like we have these levels of what we think we need therapy for. There's this stigma that just exists. But, if someone is dealing with something like this, that needs therapy, how do we even go about that process of seeking help for therapy, and is it affordable? Maybe kind of touch on a little bit of what that looks like for someone as far as accessibility and affordability.
Okay. So the number one thing we need to understand when it comes to therapy, I know in our culture especially, not just in African cultures, even in African American cultures, we do not use therapy as a resource as much as we should. And yes, we need to educate ourselves on that. And the other part of it is that we need to understand that it's a service that is proven to work. So you're going to have types of services from, excellent service to poor service. And you're going to have, the market is wide open from, if you don't have insurance or if you don't want to pay out of pocket, there are services that are being provided by the state, by local organizations and so forth. Therapy is not easy to find for free. I'll be honest with you, because in order to be a therapist itself, people have to, go to school. It's a profession that that needs to, earn a living. And it's just like, can you hire a teacher, to give you a lesson for 1 hour or two? If not, but this is actually more, because this is identifying issues that you are having and helping you solve a problem. So it is not cheap. But there are ways to find cheaper resources, which is through the state. There are also organizations that provide uninsured people with places that they can go and get therapy for cheap. The only thing that I want to mention to people is that it is something that is worth investing. Because we might feel like $120 for a session might be expensive, but we have to understand what we're getting out of it.
Right.
So it's something that is worth, I don't want to say it's expensive, because it's worth it.
Right.
It is worth identifying your issues today versus waiting 7 years of, not being able to solve your problem. So is it expensive? It might be, but it's worth all your money.
Okay. There was also a question that I got this week, and someone said, if you have a friend who's going through a lot mentally and emotionally, how do you gently encourage that person to seek professional help counseling without making them feel like they're a project to be worked on, that they're actually a person that, could be benefiting their lives and bettering their lives with a service such as this?
Give examples, give examples of how you've dealt with things. Part of, our communication is being open. We deal with difficult things in our lives, but we do not always share how we overcame those issues. I go through things in my life today, and I'm surprised that no one had prepared me for those things. And I think part of it is that, people were afraid to share their own experience. So I think we need to be open to share our own experience, because people are willing to listen and not feel like they are being a project when people actually open up to them about their own private struggles. So start off with sharing your own struggles, because we all have one. So start off with, identifying those things, open up, and then give examples for people, who have used this type of treatment and have been successful, is my best way. It's not to just say, you have a problem, you need to go deal with this.
Right.
I've had these issues before in the past, it might not be the same issue, but we've all had issues. So to start off by showing that you are human being, you also have these struggles and how you dealt with them, and basically encouraging that person and making them feel like they are, no different than you, would help them seek the.
Yeah, that's powerful. And what about people that deal with negative thinking or negative thoughts, that, they're just really hard on themselves when they make mistakes, when they make, they have failing moments, knowing that it's an event, it's not their identity. How do you help someone that's dealing with a lot of negative thinking and is always kind of beating themselves up within their life? How do you overcome that? How do you tell yourself a new story about, who you really are, and instead of defining yourself by your failures, your mistakes, and the things that you're, just kind of very discouraged by?
The number one thing with negative thoughts is, we all have them, by the way. Everyone has negative thoughts from time to time, and sometimes some people have difficulty stopping that, and it becomes a bigger problem. So first is identifying the negative thoughts. These are the negative thoughts. Once you identify them, it's, why do I have these thoughts? How can I replace these thoughts with positive thoughts? You actually literally have to mentally exercise replacing these thoughts. And then you also have to take a break from these thoughts. You have to mentally say, I am not going to think about this again constantly. It's not something that will go away, so you have to constantly tell yourself that. And then
how do you do that? Sometimes I feel like whenever you're saying something repeatedly, it's almost like reminding yourself of it. Like, is there any, I mean, I know you said replace, which is great, you know, but for someone that maybe, you know, trying to tell themselves, let's not think about this thought, let's not think about this thought. Does that ever happen where someone does just think about that thought more and more, or does that make
yes, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
As simple as I'm making it sound, when it's in serious condition, it's very serious and very difficult to do. It takes time. It takes a lot of practice. It's not going to happen over time. And gratitude is another thing that needs to help with this and that you have to utilize. So, for instance, your career is not going the way you want to. You thought at this time you would be at this point, and you're not. So that can be a very frustrating negative thought that can eventually lead to, you know, self-loathing and, you know, anger, resentment, and so forth. And how do you keep replacing positive thoughts? The way to replace negative thoughts is you need to have gratitude. So even though the career thing is not working out for me, at least I have my health, right? So replacing and having those gratitude talks to yourself will eventually give you a break from those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And that is what is important, is not always looking at the negative things, but also looking at the positive things. And sometimes, you know, it's your thoughts that are really overwhelming you, but there are really a lot of things to be happy and have gratitude about. And then, you know, having realistic planning. Again, you know, therapy will be helpful here, because if your negative thoughts are making you have difficulty functioning, then, you know, taking the next step and having somebody help you walk you through this.
That's amazing. Even within the diaspora culture, you know, sometimes there's the issues that we have of meeting our parents' expectations of being a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And, you know, though our parents have the best intentions for our lives, the culture, the community, the generation that we're in, it varies. It's very different than their upbringing. So I know a lot of people struggle with what you touched on, the idea of career, because many people are not fulfilled today within their life and career. They feel like they should be at a certain place at a certain time. They should be married with 3 kids. They should be with the white picket fence. You know, there's this imagery that we're fed within our society through, you know, film, television, social media. And that also, I know that from my experience with conversations I've been having with people, does affect someone significantly. How do you feel about social media and media and the things that we're consuming day to day? Is there a good practice that we can have as far as navigating that and minimizing, in order to minimize these negative thoughts and these unrealistic expectations?
Yes, so I'm social media user myself, guilty, but as research is showing now, social media is causing a lot of anxiety, it's causing a lot of depression, and it's causing a lot of ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So, you know, this is another form of environmental factors that would be contributing to mental illness. So it's something that we absolutely need to watch. The details of how it causes anxiety and depression and so forth is not clear, but and by the way, just to clarify for social media users, it's not just the people who likes posts and stuff like that, okay? It's people who scroll too.
Hey, put them out.
So you're hiding curtains and feel like using social media, that includes you too. So because the effects from the social media is what you actually process in your brain. You know, what are you processing from what you see on social media? Are you seeing a lot of disruptive news and, you know, it's causing you some type of distress? Or are you watching everybody blossoming on Facebook and their careers and it's making you feel like you're not doing enough? So it's creating a lot of depression, anxiety, you know, the need for attention and not getting it, and, you know, or getting getting attention too much and being reactive towards those things. So social media is a huge contributor. Again, I'm in the social media world myself, and it's something that we actually need to watch out. Hopefully we'll have more studies out there to help us, but definitely we have to take breaks and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, just like eating healthy and just like we need to take a vacation and so forth. Social media needs to be used appropriately so that it will not affect us.
Thank you so much for that. That does, really hit home. And I know we're already close to 7:30, but I want to kind of go through the rest of the subjects. So dealing with trauma. There are so many people that we deal with it within our own culture, whether it's the immigrant experience of breaking from war and coming to this country seeking education opportunity, or the first generation experience. So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, what are some causes that you've seen within your own practice of, the research 14 years as far as what contributes to trauma within our lives, of what you've been able to see in research?
Trauma is anything that people experience that was, life-threatening, stressful, accidents. People have PTSD from car accidents. People have PTSD from rape, natural disasters, war, conflicts, abuse, emotional and physical abuse. So PTSD in general, trauma in general, is having a very negative experience, and it carries on unless it's treated. It's something that we overlook, and sometimes we don't realize that we've had that, but it takes time, because PTSD not only affects you, it affects the people around you, because it's like anxiety, depression combined at the same time with distorted thinking. So it's a very difficult thing to deal with unless it's dealt with appropriately.
Right. So there was a question. Let's do this. What are some steps, practical steps, that you can tell us of how to overcome trauma in our lives that we've identified with, it's very hard for us to break from? What advice would you give for people that have dealt with negative past and things that have affected them?
So identifying, if you're affected by something, it could be, for example, you lost somebody in your life that is very close to you, and you're not sure how that is affecting you, because you are no longer the same person after that event. Right. All of a sudden, you do not like the things that you used to like. You no longer see the things in life the same way. Something has changed in you. Right. Because PTSD happens with experience. So things will be different before and after. So those changes need to be identified. And sometimes those changes might make you stronger and it might make you a better person. If that's the case, great. But then when you notice negative things, like you're avoiding people, you're avoiding things that you like, you no longer have, the desire to go conquer what you used to want to conquer and so forth, that is when you realize something has not been the same since that event. Right. Is this something that you can deal with on your own? Is it something that you can deal with by, discussing with your friends and family? Is it something that you can discuss with the pastor or the imam, or, go to any group therapies? How can you deal with it? Are you going to get the help that you need to address these issues? So in our community, we have a lot of PTSD and people do not deal with it. So it not only affects them, it affects the next generation, it affects the kids, the family, and it goes on and on and on. And when we look at a lot of things in our, whether it's history or whether it's, in our day-to-day family lives, there's a lot of PTSD that's not been dealt with. And unfortunately, when migration happens and we are coming from, different cultures and coming into a country where things are dealt with in a much more open forum, we really have a hard time comprehending these things, because all of a sudden you're told the childhood you've lived under is a authoritarian, abusive family. So now you're trying to figure out, if really, okay, there's a light. You're trying to understand what I've grown up under is has some issues. So how do you deal with that without retaliating, without being angry, without being hurtful to others? How do you deal with those things? And the way to deal with those things, again, is identifying those things, discussing them, seeking therapy if you have to, and really understanding that the treatment, not only the treatment, but the reaction to those things are very universal. So someone in China who witnessed a car accident versus someone in Virginia who were both in the accident, I should say, are going to have difficulty every time they get behind the car until that PTSD is treated. So do not be ashamed of your PTSD, because it's not just you. Anyone who goes through those kind of experiences are going to have the same response. And for those of us who are not directly dealing with a PTSD currently, or who's not having that exact same trauma, we need to understand when people are angry, when people are hateful, or when people are just mad at the world, because that is a cry for help. That is a cry to let you know that this person has dealt with something significant and their reaction is completely distorted.
Right. So I got another question this week, and it says, as an Ethiopian immigrant, I find myself having mixed emotions about the recent peace talks between Ethiopia and Eritrea. On one hand, I'm happy that there is a glimpse of hope for the people of both war-torn countries. However, on the other hand, I question whether or not these peace talks will necessarily translate into having open and honest conversations within the very polarized Habesha diaspora community. So in light of these things, how do we address and approach the emotional and psychological impact of the Eritrean-Ethiopian war while remaining culturally sensitive and respectful of the sovereignty of Eritrea? Thought it was a very interesting and a good question, very relevant to real issues that people are dealing with, within our generation. How would you speak to that experience?
Yeah, so I think, the problem here, and, I'm so glad she asked this question, is that we have a lot of stories. If you look at stories from World War II, the stories, the history has so many authors and different lenses. People give you different stories based on their experience. We can watch the same movie and have different feelings. And as we can actually currently see with what's going on, people are going to have different experiences and people are going to have different stories. So what is important, when we really look at the bigger picture, what we need to look at is ourselves, really, me. So how do I treat people? How do I react towards others? What is really important? Who can I control? What can we control?
Right.
Is taking, other people's PTSD, whether it's families or friends, and carrying it on and transferring that, is that really healthy for me? Or is it finding peace within myself because I'm going to be treating everyone the same way that needs to be treated? I'm going to respect everyone with their culture, with their, even if I don't agree with them. We don't necessarily have to agree. But there is a responsibility that we hold within ourselves, because if we do not respect that, and if we do not do what is right within our hearts, it doesn't matter what other history is taking place, because at the end of the day, our peace lies not with what contract is signed by two different countries. Our peace lies between the way we treat each other, the way we treat the next person next to us, and that is really the main focus. And, you know, it's not about always being loyal to your country or your countrymen and so forth, because sometimes your countrymen are wrong.
Right.
You know,
reality.
Your own brother and your own sister could be wrong. What needs to matter is that you absolutely need to make sure that we as individuals are treated the way we should treat each other, and that you're accountable for that. I think, you know, we can't hold older people or elderly people responsible anymore. We cannot act based upon history that has been, you know, told to us 200 years ago and 3,000 years ago. They have lived their lives. We need to live our lives, and the way to live them is to make sure that we do the right thing to another fellow human being.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it does happen. Change does happen on the ground level, and it starts within us. And we have to start with having vulnerable and honest conversations with ourselves, with, you know, what we've experienced, and processing it and being healed from it, and being able to treat the other person that may be different or have different perspective, or just a different background, but seeking to develop empathy and treat them. So I think I loved everything, how you articulated that. And it definitely resonates with me and my own experiences as well, because sometimes it can be so overwhelming when you're, you know, looking at countries and governments, and you're dealing with so many issues that are outside of your control. And there's so many people that do have stories and perspectives and thoughts. So sometimes it's difficult you can get lost within all of that, all of the things that are happening, and really lose the inner peace and forget about your neighbor and the person that you have right next door, and how are you dealing with that issue, and what are you doing about it, you know, and handling it as if it's within your control, handling what's in your control. So I love that. So I'm so glad you shared that.
And by the way, I'm still, you know, I'm, you know, giving these pointers, not because I'm anywhere, have applied everything. I am learning as I go myself, and I'm learning this, and, you know, we learn more from each other by having these conversations, and we hold ourselves accountable by having these conversations. And it's a process that we will continue to perfect.
Right. Now it's so true. And me as well. We're in the same boat. We're learning from one another. We're opening up conversation and dialogue on these things that we deal with internally. So it definitely does go a long way. So I appreciate you for sharing that. So we're already over time. I want to get to substance abuse. You know, this is something that's huge within our community, our culture, and society. But let's just start off by saying this. How does someone know that they're struggling with substance abuse?
Basically, you find out that you're struggling with substance abuse when you have, you know, difficulty stopping, when you feel like there is a need for the substance, when there is a priority being given to the substance, and you know, having to live your life around that substance, and disregarding what you have known or what you have learned, or what family and friends are you know, mentioning in regards to your behavior with the substance. By that point, you have serious problem with substance abuse once you have, you know, more than few people mentioning or asking questions to what's going on with you. Very simple.
Right. So if somebody is struggling with, you know, substance abuse, let's say alcohol, or just, I mean, anything, what are the practical steps that someone can be able to do in order to kind of get help, and whether it's therapy, and what does exist for help for people that are dealing with substance abuse?
So one of the things with addiction is that you have to, again, acknowledge it. Just about everything is you have to first acknowledge that there's a problem. The second thing is you have to really remove yourself from the stigma of substance abuse, because substance abuse is also an illness. you don't have control over it. So it's not something that you should be ashamed of. It's something that you should treat like an illness. Just like everything else, you should try the least invasive way you can help yourself through this, whether it's, making a plea with yourself saying, okay, I'm, no longer doing this, and trying that and see how you are able to accomplish first. And then the next step is, if you can't, to really seek medical help in regards to this. One of the things I want to backtrack, especially because we have a lot of younger American, generation on Instagram, is that this is an illness. And also, we have to make sure that we're not going to be praised to pharmaceutical companies. We really need to make sure that, because one of the things, there's a huge, difference between when you go seek help, at the doctor's office, you have to be very expressive of what you're expressing. Because most of the time when you go to the doctors feel like they have to solve your problem. Right. You're there because they have to solve your problem.
Right.
Okay. So you have to be very expressive of the things that you have tried and why you're having these problems. You are really ultimately the person who's going to diagnose yourself, because you go there and you explain yourself. So you don't want to go to a doctor and say, I'm having an anxiety because of, I recently lost my sister. Right. And they're going to say, okay, would you like, some Ativan? Would you like some medicine? Is the first thing that most doctors will be saying. Little do you know that those drugs have addiction problems if you're using them and abusing them. So we need to be really, we need to be really careful. We need to understand, because medical care is very important, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we're not falling into traps. The other thing that we need to make sure is that we need to be the #1 advocates for ourselves. We need to identify what are we being prescribed. We need to see what it is, why, what are, the side effects, because we don't want to jump into a diagnosis. We need to first exhaust the things that need to be exhausted, which is self-help, therapy, family intervention, group therapies, exercise, eating healthy, and so forth, before we jump into treatment.
When you say self-help, what are you saying? I'm sorry.
Self-help, I mean by, you can read self-help books, you can educate yourself about those things, you can find alternative ways to deal with stress or, addiction. Maybe you need to have a change of environment. Maybe you need to surround yourself with people who have the same struggles so that you can get some strength. Many ways that you can help yourself.
You said something interesting. Surround yourself with similar people that have the same struggle. Do you think?
Yes.
Interesting. Can you elaborate more on that?
So, you learn so much from people who have already gone through these experiences.
Good point.
So if you're surrounded with people who've never had these problems before, you'll get a lot of judgmental, comments. Well, you can do this on your own. Just do it, or get over it, or so forth. But when you surround yourself with people who have had those experiences, you actually get to learn something from them, because they'll tell you where their breaking point was, where they had issues, and what helped them and what did not help them. Yeah. So as much as it's important to be in a good environment, it's really important to surround yourself with people who have some experience and some exposure to things like this, because otherwise you might feel very lost.
Yeah.
So that's very important. The other things is, there's a lot of things that have changed since the times that I was much younger. Right now, even in music and so forth, medicines, pharmaceutical medications are being advertised to kids, and we really do not understand what is happening. And next thing you know, people are, taking painkillers as party drugs and so forth. So we really need to make sure that we are exposed to all the current information before, so that our sisters and brothers are not going to be exposed to negative things.
That's huge. And I want to add this as well. There's a study by Albert Bandura that talks about social cognitive theory. And they gave this example. If you're dealing with a phobia, for example, a phobia of snakes, it would be more effective if you went to somebody that's been through that problem and has overcome the fear than someone that could be an expert on the field and has so many degrees and is saying that you can overcome that. It's more effective when you can actually see somebody and converse with somebody that's went through that experience than someone that hasn't, but may be qualified and educated and can be able to tell you all the right things to do. So that does speak to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's huge. So I want to make sure to honor your time, and I want us to open up for questions as well. Would that be okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, first I wanted to ask the question. Well, we actually touched on this earlier. I was going to ask about, well, actually, no, this is good. What are some practical places that people can go in order to get therapy, counseling, and help? Are there any organizations that you know about, or any websites that people can go check out? Kind of maybe if you have anything that's informative that can be of use of resources.
Sure. I actually wanted to share one of the organizations that I look up for looking up treatments and therapy sessions. And you can actually go to their website and just enter a zip code, and it will give you a list of clinics and give you a list of counseling sessions, whether it's psychiatrists that you're looking for. It also gives you options whether you're looking for something free or you have insurance and so forth. So I will actually share the website with you at the end. I've kind of typed it up.
Okay.
And have it right here for you. This is the one, needymeds.org is the one where you can get referral by zip code.
Okay. So www.needymeds.org, that's Needy meds, meds.org. Thank you for that. That's huge.
Yep, and I will take a picture and just screenshot to one of the comments at the end so that people will have that information.
Right.
Really helpful to, I like the fact that it categorizes it whether you have insurance or not and self-pay and so forth.
Right.
So yeah, and then other organizations that you can also use is the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, which is SAMHSA, which is here for people who are in the DMV area. You can go to their website as well, and you can find out programs around, based on your zip code and your state. There is also NIMH, which is National Institute of Mental Health, which I'm actually also an employee there, where we do research, mental health research, and there's research with alcohol related issues. There's research with disorders such as depression and schizophrenia and so forth. Sometimes people may give research, not sure about research, but one of the things about research is you first do not have to pay for it. You usually get excellent treatment. There is laws that protect you, and you're actually contributing to science. And, most of the time you'll end up finding a lot of things about yourself and something that will benefit you for the future. And then another place in regards to sober living is that there are places, housings that you can go to where you just pay for rooms or for shared rooms where you can get help by attending groups there. You basically pay rent, but it's low rent, even in the DC area, where you'll be spending time with people who are, who've had issues with substance abuse in the past. And, this is very useful program. And I find oxfordhouse.org, Oxford House, which is available to just about in every state that people can use to help themselves recover from any substances, are the resources that I think about right now.
That's great. Thank you. So we have about, honestly, over time, we have maybe 8 more minutes if we really want to close in on an hour. But I wanted to open up for questions, maybe just take a couple of questions. So audience, anyone that's tuned in right now, if you have any questions, I want to be able to ask our Ledet anything, please start firing away. I was noticing that there were questions earlier, but there's just so much. I'll
Then I comment, NAMI is an organization. Yes, I shouldn't forget NAMI. It's a National Association for Mental Health. NAMI.org, NAMI.org is a great organization to get resources from. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? I know I'm kind of scrolling through. This is interesting. I don't know your religious background, but how do you balance the religious and theological implications involved in addressing mental illness among people of faith?
I think faith plays a great role in our, psychological well-being. To some people, faith is very, very important. It's just like part of, self-care. Just like, eating healthy is important. It's a spiritual thing that, that is fulfilled by faith, and it's very important. I mean, in my personal life, faith is important to me, for instance, but that doesn't apply to everyone. So there are things that, we can use our faith to help us with staying strong, to, help us guide to the next step, having faith, and so forth. And then there is times where we have to actually seek further help. And that doesn't mean that you will stop using, your faith. It just means that you might need concurrent help with illness. It's a simple example would be, having uncontrolled depression or having schizophrenia. Again, you try everything from, from self-help, from reaching out to people, from therapy, and, starting from the less invasive ways, going to talk to, your pastor or your imam and so forth, and seeking religious assistance. But even now, mental health professionals really work closely with religious people because, we need each other. In order to heal someone, we don't just heal the physical and the emotional, but we also need to heal them spiritually, if that's, the way they are connected. So it's not something that overlaps each other or crushes one another. It's something that we need to incorporate in our daily lives if we have spiritual needs.
Right. I love it. Another question that also came up: how can an individual self-identify they're having a mental illness symptom, or if they're just experiencing a negative thought or experience that they hopefully will pass? So it's like, are you having a bad day or a bad week, or how do you self-identify between that and you're suffering or struggling with a mental illness symptom?
Okay, so just because, for instance, you're having, 2 weeks or so having depression because, things didn't go the way you wanted things, that doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong with you.
Right.
People will have, ups and downs in life. People will have depression and anxiety and, different types of negative feelings throughout their lives. It does not mean that, you know, you absolutely have mental illness because of that. What it means is when you can no longer function, when you can no longer have aspirations, and when you can no longer follow, you know, a plan, or when you can't even plan for yourself, then there is a problem, and those things needs to be addressed. So don't be too hard on yourself and feel like maybe I'm having, you know, a mental issue because I don't feel like doing much but just going to work and coming home and just sleeping. It might be a phase. And if it's something that you don't like, how do you change it?
Right.
You plan on a change, and hold yourself accountable and make those changes. If you're able to do those things, or, you know, if you reach out to other people and say, listen, I actually need somebody to distract me so that I can actually do things. And I need people to come and, you know, take me out and so forth. It's okay. That's fine. Because you being able to make those changes and adjustments and even thinking is proof to you that you're okay, because you're able to process these things and you're able to act up on them. But if you have, you know, 3 months of not leaving the house and not doing anything, and
Right.
it goes on, you know, the year has passed and you haven't done anything for the whole year, then it's a serious concern that needs to be treated.
Right. That's good. That's good. I'm going to go through a couple more just really quick, if that's okay. What are good methods or ways to explain this to elder Abishas when they believe faith and Amal is the answer? How do you communicate that with the older generation? That's something I definitely resonate with, because, you know, we have differences within our homes as first generation or second generation with the older generation. So how do you communicate that? How does that conversation start?
I mean, I've seen so many families who have these issues about, you know, the religion and stuff. My way of dealing with it is to accept what they believe. Let them believe that way, you know, because it's impossible. Imagine their experiences and your experiences. It's totally different. The reason why they believe that way is because of the way they have lived, right, and the way they have been taught. So in order to change someone who has been in that mindset, you know, for 50, 60, 70 years is a much harder. So allow people who have, you know, who've had that belief for a long time, and just, you know, customize your own beliefs now, because that's, you know, that's them. And this is the next generation. And, you know, our generation is going to have innovation. It's going to have a lot of different ideas, and we do not need to be held to those old ideas. So allow them to have that freedom to think the way they think, respect them for that, and you know, add your own and customize on it. Another question that I briefly saw is, can you treat PTSD? And yet the answer is yes, it can be cured. It can be cured because, but it requires regular maintenance. Okay. And it needs, you know, continued therapy until it's gone. So it's not something that is cured within a week or two, but it's something that people work on. For some people, it might take a year. For some people, it might take years. But PTSD is curable.
That's great to know. And then someone also asked, probably end with this question, someone asked about being a public educator. And they said, what do you think their roles or responsibilities, hopefully I'm not, you know, speaking wrong, but maybe roles and responsibilities of public educators on kind of helping students that may need mental health care. How do you service that within that role?
So this is a very difficult population to be, you know, instructors in schools, and, you know, to deal with different population, different cultures, different experiences, different backgrounds. One of the things that I've experienced in my last 15 years, especially when I worked in, you know, in hospitals, in city hospitals, is a lot of referrals came from schools. A lot of referrals came from schools, and we got less referrals from school during the summer. What does that tell you? During the summer, kids are at home, so they are less referred by parents, but they are referred from school during the school year. So there needs to be a lot of training about how do kids act when they are in school versus when they are at home. There's a lot of things that kids might share with teachers that they don't share at home, and vice versa. Teachers also might have expectations from children that that they're not getting. So it's a very fine line, and it's very important to have this dialogue, and it's something that I'm interested in continuing to go to schools and discuss this matter with teachers and students, because early referral also causes a lot of issues. It does help, it does save a lot of lives, but there's also a lot of misdiagnosis. A lot of misdiagnosis happens when people are young. It could be because of culture shock, it could be because of problems within the family dynamics, and could be because people do not have enough financial support, or it could be there could be some abuse in the family, but the kid is coming to school and acting out because of that reason, and next thing you know, they are referred to a psychiatric service, and now they are on medication, and they're only 11 and 10. So those things are huge problems that need to be addressed, and it's something that will affect generations. So it's a big conversation, and thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, thank you for the person that asked that question. So we're going to end the conversation, but I wanted you to have the chance to share about your new exciting film that will be coming out pretty soon. I think it's important even within this conversation because it touches on mental health. And so can you maybe share a little bit about that film and when we can expect it if you want to do a release?
Yes. So the film is called Chula. A lot of people in the DC area have heard about it. They've supported me. A lot of people have supported me to get it this far. I've been having a lot of personal issues this year, starting from losing a sister and also having great things in my life, like having a child. So I've been pretty laid back and not working on it as much as I wanted to, but it's something that is definitely going to happen. I have to work hard. I'm so happy that in the meantime, while I'm not able to work on that directly, that I'm able to do things like this right now and still be, still have the conversation alive. It's something that's going to be coming out hopefully sometime soon. I will definitely keep everyone updated, and I will definitely use you to help me promote it, Nate. I'm really thankful that you are interested in this topic. You're really a great link for me to reach to generations that I'm not able to reach. So it's something that will be for all of us. It will be for for people who are young, older, and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to get that project. It's not easy, and I'm hoping that that we can get it out there.
Yeah, and again, like you mean so much to the community, and hearing your story and the space you're navigating in regularly, that needs a bigger platform, and anything I can do and helping you support that vision and that film get out for the community and the culture, please don't hesitate. Keep fighting. We're behind you. We're with you. We're supporting you, and we can't wait to see the film. So, and also be praying for you and your loss with your sister. I had no idea. So I'll be praying for you and your family as well. And was it a daughter that you had this year?
Yes.
A daughter. Okay. A daughter. Yeah. What's your daughter's name again? I'm sorry.
Tame.
Tame?
Tame.
Okay. Man, that's awesome. So yeah, we'll definitely be rooting for you and supporting you any way that we can. So I hope everyone that's tuned in and is watching this understands that within an hour, we spent a good hour. I wasn't expecting to do an hour, honestly. Thank you for staying that long. But I knew it wasn't going to be possible to solve everyone's problem. But I wanted to accomplish two things as we were having this conversation. It just became more apparent. One, start a conversation, and two, release the fear. I think these are two things that we've been able to accomplish, and I'm so happy that this conversation has started, and I'm so excited that we kind of release the fear and the negative stigmas that surround mental health care, and allowing someone to at least know what are the proper steps to move forward. How do I make sense of these feelings that I'm having? Because to be honest, we're just not as informed, within our culture and our community and society, and things are just very foreign to us. So I appreciate that we have advocates like you that are really pushing and fighting and using your voice for a much needed conversation. So once again, thank you everyone for watching. Please share it. And Ledet, thank you again.
Thank you, Nate. See you guys.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
This concludes our episode of Africa and Us. Thank you for listening. Be sure to share the episode and follow the journey on social media with me at Nate Araya. Be encouraged.